Hello Mouses! Today it's a really humid day. We missed yesterday's recording because it just got too late and we lost all the light. And the reason being that we couldn't film during the day because when we were filming it was pouring down with rain and all you could hear was on the windows, and that didn't make for a good sound. So we had to wait, and then it got too dark, and now it's today. So let's get straight into it. Viewer Ben Wakeling has asked a question. You might know Ben from Amazon, where he's the author of one of the best-selling books on parenting with Goodbye Pert Breasts, a book title I think I'll never forget. But anyway, he asked this question. I dropped a clanger by selling my phone through a Cash for Old Phones website, and by reading the online reviews, I've fallen into their trap of offering you one price and then revising their offer upon receipt of the phone. What can I do? Okay, before I answer this question, I have to point out that although I've just finished a law degree, it doesn't actually grant me the ability to give legal advice. But we can use this as an example of the law and just talk about the unfair terms in contracts, which is what Ben's problem actually falls under. So let's do that instead. Now, as we've discussed in a previous video, link here, a contract is an agreement between two parties where one will either suffer a detriment or pay amount of money, and the other will receive a benefit or forego a certain right that they have. We have offer acceptance, consideration, and the intention of creating legal relations. That's all you need for a contract. Now, the terms on which our relationship is made can be as simple or as complex as we're prepared to deal with. Usually we have simple legal relationships, such as the purchase of sale of goods, where one term is we'll give you money and the other term is that you'll give us whatever we've bought, and things like that. Then we have warranties and things like that go on top of it, and it makes it a bit more complex. But for the most part, that's a fairly simple legal relationship. And then we have the more complex ones where terms are put in to protect one party from actions of another, or to protect one party where something happens which renders them unable to deal with their side of the contract through no fault of their own. And then we get some other terms. And other terms such as we reserve the right to alter the price that we're prepared to pay unilaterally and without any actual reason. That's the kind of term that we have to have legislation to protect the other party from. The reason that sometimes this comes up is because both parties aren't exactly on a level playing field when they're negotiating their terms. And sometimes one party won't be able to negotiate at all because the other party has all of the power and says, if you want what we're providing, you deal with us on our terms. Now, set terms and conditions aren't necessarily a bad thing, but where the one party uses its set terms and conditions to impose terms that are totally unfair, that's where legislation steps in and goes, no, you can't do that. So, what legislation do we have? Well, first of all, we have the Unfair Contract Terms Act of 1977. This was brought in to deal with what's called an exclusion clause, where basically companies will say, we cannot be held liable for any loss or damage howsoever caused. Which sounds a little bit bad, doesn't it? Because, oh, I just bought a toaster from you, it's badly made, and as a result my house is burnt down. I need some compensation for this, because I know I have no house. And the company goes, no. Our terms and conditions say that we're not liable howsoever caused, and faulty products due to negligence are definitely howsoever caused. So the government comes along and goes, no, that's not going to work. Unless you have a reasonable excuse for having this exemption clause, you can't rely on it. And there's a few other things with the Unfair Contract Terms law, which we don't have to go into here because it doesn't really fit with Ben's problem. But that's the gist of it. The Unfair Contract Terms go, if your terms are unfair, like an exclusion clause that excludes everything rather than we won't be held responsible for the actions of third parties that neither of us could possibly have predicted, then you're not going to find that can be used. Now, that was 1977. The law has changed a little since then. It's mostly case law, which is defining what reasonable terms are and what aren't and things like that. And then along comes the European Union, that much maligned beast, and goes, companies got a bit wise to all the things that we're already trying to stop them doing, and now they're doing little extra things. So we're going to have to go for something a bit more wide-ranging. And along comes the Unfair Terms in Consumer Contracts Regulations of 1999. This piece of legislation is very big. It's long, it's fairly complicated, but all of its terms are written as generically as possible in order to cover as many potential problems as we can. And the one that we're dealing with here is paragraph 1J of Schedule 2, which states, terms may be unfair if they have the effect of enabling the seller or supplier to alter the terms of the contract unilaterally without a valid reason which is specified in the contract. Now, doesn't this sound an awful lot like what happened in Ben's case, where the company was prepared to give him price X for his telephone, but when they received the telephone, they said they would only give him a fraction of that? Now, I can understand if it turned out that he had damaged his phone and hadn't told them, then yeah, sure, that's a valid reason, and that's covered in the unfair terms regulations. You can have a valid reason for reducing. But if there's no valid reason, such as, oh, we've just decided that we will give you a certain amount on your valuation because we wanted your custom, but we're not actually going to pay it, that's not a valid reason. So Ben, in this case, could go to them and say, well, the regulations say that you can't do this, and then quote the regulation to them and say, I want my phone back, or I want the original amount that you were going to give me, or if you're not going to give that, then I want the phone back, and I want damages in the terms of I had to post this to you, and that cost me some money, so I want the money back that I've had to spend. That's perfectly fine. That's the kind of damages you're going to get from this, because consumer contract regulations are civil, and civil law is very, very clear on what it will do. You can't have excessive damages unless the courts decide that it needs to award punitive damages to act as a deterrent to other companies. You can have specific performance, but it's not often given, as in, I want you to pay the original amount that you quoted. But in the case of contract law, where the contract was very clear and both parties should have really been coming into it intending to uphold it, and the fact is that the company was effectively fraudulent because it was trying to gain your custom through deception, then yeah, it's possible that they're going to give an award of specific performance, but most of the time it'll just be damages. Especially when chances are the company, by the time that you get to them and get them into court, will have already sold the phone anyway and therefore can't return it. But anyway, that's all we've got time for today. As always, leave questions and comments down below and I'll deal with them as quickly as I can. And if you like this video, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe if you like it a lot, and share it to those who you think might benefit from it. Until tomorrow, I've been Zoe Kirk-Robinson, you've been watching the video, and I'll see you later.